Today we're going deep on a story called the Dragonfly attack. And this isn't just another hack. This is a story that completely changed the game. It's about how the most dangerous weapon isn't some super virus, but a simple betrayal.
So let me ask you something. What do you think is more dangerous than a hacker trying to smash their way into a digital fortress? You picture this huge, fortified wall and someone on the outside just desperately trying to find a crack. But what if the real threat isn't even outside the walls?
It's an invitation from someone you already trust. See, the most devastating attacks, they don't have to break down the door, because sometimes you just hand them the keys. And that's exactly what this story is about, a profound supply chain betrayal.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 2014, and while the cybersecurity world was buzzing about all sorts of things, something else was happening. Something quiet, almost invisible. A campaign was running deep in the shadows, and its real purpose? Well, it was way more sinister than anyone could have imagined at the time.
So what happened was, this silent, super sophisticated cyber campaign got uncovered, and it was targeting hundreds of energy companies all across Europe and North America. But this was no smash and grab. No. This was patient, methodical, and just unbelievably widespread. The attackers were like ghosts, just drifting through the networks of some of the most critical infrastructure on the planet without setting off a single alarm.
And what's really fascinating is how the understanding of this thing unfolded. I mean, look at the timeline here. Early 2014, the infiltration begins, totally undetected. By June, it finally goes public, but nobody has a clue why it's happening. The motive is a total mystery. It was only way later, after the fact, that investigators figured out the chilling truth. This was never just about spying. This was prep work for something much, much bigger.
And the scale? Just staggering. We're talking over 1,000 organizations were compromised. And these weren't random companies. They were targeting the very people who keep our lights on. Power plants, grid operators, the whole shebang.
But here's where it gets really weird. As investigators started digging in, a strange pattern popped up. There was nothing stolen, at least nothing of financial value. No credit card data, no secret designs, no ransom notes, all the usual motives, just gone. So if they weren't after money, what on earth were they really after?
And this is where the genius and the true betrayal of the plan comes into focus. They didn't go after the locks on the doors. They went after the one thing that underpins all of modern industry: trust. Specifically, the trust between businesses and their suppliers.
So the attackers, they were called Dragonfly or sometimes Energetic Bear, they didn't go after the power grids directly. I mean, think about it. Hitting a power grid head-on, that's insanely difficult. These are some of the most defended networks on Earth. So Dragonfly didn't even try. Instead, they went after a much, much softer target.
Their method was honestly brilliant, a true digital Trojan horse. Step 1, they didn't hack the energy company. They hacked one of its trusted vendors, specifically a company that makes industrial control systems. Step 2, they took a legitimate, normal software update from that vendor and secretly poisoned it with their own malware. Step 3, they just waited. They waited for the engineers at the actual energy companies to download that trusted update. And Step 4, boom. They walked right in the digital front door, no questions asked.
This specific tactic actually has a name. It's called a watering hole attack. And the analogy is perfect. Just like a lion waits by the one river it knows all the animals have to visit, these attackers didn't chase their targets. They just compromised the websites, the digital watering holes, that they knew the engineers from these energy companies would eventually visit. It's an absolutely brilliant and terrifying exploitation of routine and trust.
All right, so they're in. The Trojan horse worked. Now what? Well, now they deployed their primary weapon, a custom-built piece of malware designed for a very, very specific mission.
This tool was a remote access Trojan, or RAT, called Havex. And Havex was not your average computer virus. A RAT is all about giving an attacker quiet, persistent control over a computer from afar. And Havex, it was an absolute master of stealth.
But here's the kicker. The mission of Havex, it did not steal financial data. It did not encrypt files and ask for a ransom. It ignored all that stuff. Instead, it was like a specialized scout. It just quietly scanned the network, looking for one thing: industrial protocols.
It was hunting for the industrial control systems, the SCADA devices, basically the digital switches that control the physical world. And once it found them, it started to map the entire operational network, sending that blueprint back home to the attackers.
Yeah, it was purely an intelligence gathering operation. They were creating a detailed blueprint of critical infrastructure. So this confirms it, right? It was never, ever about theft. It was about reconnaissance. The attackers were meticulously building a complete schematic of their target's most vital systems. And the only question left was, why? Why go to all this trouble?
And this is the part of the story where everything clicks into place, where all the pieces of the puzzle form a picture that is honestly deeply unsettling. The true motive? It had very little to do with the digital world at all. Just look at the difference here. On one hand, you have a traditional hack, right? The goal is usually financial. You target data, like credit cards, and your method is to steal it and sell it. Simple. But then you have Dragonfly. The goal? Physical control. The target, not data, but physical infrastructure, like power grids. And the method? It wasn't steal and sell. It was map and prepare.
This wasn't espionage. This was battlefield preparation. Let that sink in for a second. The attackers weren't just snooping around. They were mapping the digital command and control systems of a nation's power grid. This is the cyber equivalent of a military scout mapping out enemy positions right before an invasion.
Because with these blueprints that Havex created, the attackers now had everything they needed. They had the potential capability to remotely disrupt or even physically sabotage entire energy grids. They could cause blackouts. They could shut down power plants, all at a future time entirely of their own choosing.
So yeah, the Dragonfly attack was a massive wake-up call for everyone. It signaled this huge shift in how nation-states think about cyber conflict, and it's left a legacy that we are very much still dealing with today.
What was its lasting impact? Well, for one, it proved beyond a doubt that the supply chain was a critical vulnerability. It also basically wrote the playbook for nation-states to shift from loud, direct assaults to these quiet, indirect infiltrations. And, most importantly, it just completely blurred the line between cyber espionage and actual preparation for physical warfare.
And make no mistake, this isn't ancient history. The threat is more real now than ever. In fact, it's projected that 54%, that's more than half, of all large organizations will say the supply chain is their single biggest cybersecurity vulnerability. That is the direct legacy of attacks like Dragonfly.
In the end, the Dragonfly attack taught the world a terrifying lesson. The most secure, most fortified facilities can be completely breached, not through a flaw in their walls, but through their most trusted partners. So it leaves us with this really unsettling question. In a world this interconnected, how secure is any fortress when the threat is already inside the walls?